Russia lists the United States as a country committing unfriendly actions towards Russia shortly after the U.S. expelled Russian diplomats. Where does China fit in this latest U.S. Russia spat? And Chinese President Xi Jinping emphasized China's carbon neutrality target at a recent virtual climate summit. How does China intend to reach this ambitious target? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. The U.S. is certainly on the list. The Russian Foreign Ministry was referring to a newly signed decree as the latest countermeasure to U.S. sanctions imposed in April. However, against the backdrop of the tit-for-tat confrontations, both officials of the U.S. and Russia agree to stay in touch and are expecting a presidential summit in the summer. Were the U.S.'s sanctions a symbolic move? What are the odds of face-to-face talks between the leaders of the two countries? I'm pleased to be joined today by Victor Gao, Chair Professor at Soochow University, and from Moscow by Dmitry Babich, political analyst at Sputnik International. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Now, the U.S., as I said, issued an executive order with sanctions on April the 15th in regard to the so-called harmful foreign activities of the government of Russia, including Russia's alleged election interferences and cyber activities. And as pointed out by some media outlets, the cause of the action of the sanctions also includes Russia's military buildup in Ukraine. Mr. Babich, exactly on what basis were these sanctions issued? Are they justified?
Well, they are certainly not justified. First, even your phrase, Russian military buildup in Ukraine. The Russian troops in the last few weeks were amassing not in Ukraine, but on the border because of the military exercise that Russians had. And second, because of the threat of a new spiral of a civil war inside Ukraine. So, when the United States moves its troops and has military exercises right next to Russia's border, thousands of miles away from the United States, we don't say that this is something criminal, that this is unacceptable, and we don't expel American diplomats or impose sanctions because of that. As for the elections, it's just laughable because there was absolutely no evidence given of any Russian interference. The Americans didn't even say in what way Russians could damage elections. I mean, Russians didn't steal the ballots. They didn't fill the ballot boxes. As for activity in the social networks, I mean, you or me, we can talk to our friends in the United States via social networks. We can express our opinions. Maybe in this way we will persuade our American friends to vote for some candidate or another candidate. But it doesn't mean that we interfere. It's just the reality of the new world that people can communicate between various continents, and the American government has been pushing for it officially for many years, open world where people can exchange opinions. Yes, foreigners can tilt public opinion in various countries now because people have access to internet, people have access to television, but it doesn't mean that something criminal happened and that the elections are not free or they are not, independent anymore. So I just don't see how Russia could do something so wrong that the United States describes in its accusation.
The executive order, the U.S. presidential executive order, brought the expulsion of 10 Russian diplomats and economic sanctions against certain Russian individuals and entities. However, U.S. President Joe Biden later explained that I chose to be proportionate. He said that the U.S. is not looking to kick off a cycle of escalation and conflict with Russia. We want a stable, predictable relationship. Victor, how do you understand such seemingly contradicting moves? Is the U.S. merely bluffing to Russia or hoping that a symbolic move will bring Russia to the negotiating table?
No, I think what's appalling is that at the very core, the United States doesn't seem to have the minimum respect for Russia as a great country, as one of the strongest military powers, as a country which has made a tremendous amount of contribution to the establishment of the current international order after sustaining the heaviest losses and sacrifices in the Second World War. And the United States has forces which seem to be very eager to continue to dismember Russia as it is. This is, I think, the root cause of all the frictions or confrontation between the United States and Russia. Purely from the Chinese perspective, we fully respect Russia as a great country. We fully respect the Russian people as a great nation. And we think we need to deal with Russia with equality and mutual respect. And we oppose any appalling pressures exercised by the United States on Russia. As for the sanctions, I don't think any sanctions against a great country, a strong country like Russia will work. It will be counterproductive. It will really poison the relations between Russia and the United States, and eventually it will turn the American people as a loser. And it will also poison the atmosphere for international cooperation, especially involving major powers like the United States, China, and Russia at the very top in the very difficult international situation as mankind is faced with.
Mr. Babich, on a specific term, however, how are these U.S. moves impacting Russia? Is there any impact at all? I mean, the chief executive of a Russian financial service group said that the impact of the economic sanctions are limited. How do you see it?
Well, there was a certain slowdown in the economic growth of Russia, which was phenomenal in the early 2000s. Experts argue how much the sanctions produced this effect, or how much it was produced by the fall on the commodity prices, I mean on the oil prices and the prices for natural gas. But certainly it's not a disaster for Russia. I mean, if you come to Moscow or to St. Petersburg, or even if you come to small towns, you won't see problems in food or any kind of commodities that the population needs. So maybe some big companies have lost some of their revenues. A lot of rich people are now feeling unsafe about their assets abroad, but it's very unwise on the side of the United States to demonize Russia's leader, President Vladimir Putin, and to alienate the Russian elite. Because, yes, like in any country, elite is important in Russia. And when they feel threatened by the United States, when the United States and the European Union include them in various sorts of blacklists, I think it damages the United States and the EU much more than it damages Russia, because these people just move their capitals back to Russia and they concentrate on the country's development. They could be much more useful for the West if the West just left them in peace.
Well, Russia has, as I said, announced this list of countries committing unfriendly acts towards Russia. Victor, how do you look at this measure? How severe, how strong is that a measure, and what possible impact will it cast against the United States?
Well, I truly believe if any country pushes Russia around, Russia will push back. There is no doubt about it, and Russia probably will reinforce the pushback against any country which unrightfully pushes Russia. And I think this will, again, make the relations between the United States and Russia further deteriorate. And I hope they will not deteriorate to such a point of no return, because if it gets even worse, you are talking about a potential face down or showdown between these two largest military powers in the world. And this does not spell well for mankind as a whole. So we would urge the United States and Russia to reconsider their very tough positions against each other, and hopefully there will be improvement of relations between these two countries, or even a rapprochement, because I firmly believe if Russia and the United States can deal with each other with equality and mutual respect, it's more deserving for these two very great countries in the world.
Finally, some Chinese experts have pointed out that China should have a clear head about possible situation in the future, meaning potential U.S. economic sanctions against China, the state, not just Chinese companies. Victor, do you agree with such precautions? Do you think China should be cautious about this?
Well, I think precaution is always a good virtue, and China is not an exception. However, I think we need to be very much looking at the substance of the issue between us. China and the United States has the largest trading volume in the world, and the United States and the Chinese economy are very much integrated with each other. There are dangerous or even evil forces in the United States which want to drive for a complete disconnection between China and the United States, but that's against the fundamental interest of the American people and the Chinese people. And I don't think they can achieve their goal, however they mislabel that. Therefore, I personally have great confidence in the continued status of China-US relations, because you are talking about tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people across China and the United States working together with a common goal for maximizing benefits for both the Chinese people and the American people. So while we need to guard against these very dangerous politicians in the United States which miscalculate and which misguide the American people, we also need to have confidence that no one can really disrupt China-US relations at the very core.
Yeah. Well, many thanks to my guests from China and Russia. Of course, the opinion of the Americans and Europeans are missing here, or Western Europeans, I should say. But at least you get the Chinese and Russian perspective, some Chinese and Russian perspective. Many thanks to Victor and Dmitry.